A massive crystal chamber stretched out like a frozen ocean under the artificial suns that lit the Galactic Council's meeting hall. 47 different species filled the curved seating areas that spiraled up toward the dome ceiling. Air hummed with translation devices working overtime as dozens of different languages mixed together in a symphony of accusation. Ambassador John Carter stood alone in the center of the chamber. His gray hair was neatly combed, and his dark blue diplomatic uniform bore the simple Earth insignia on his chest. He kept his hands clasped behind his back as alien voices rose around him like a storm. The man had served Earth's diplomatic corps for 30 years, but had never faced anything quite like this dot above him. Holographic displays showed images that made his stomach turn cold. Human soldiers in battle armor, spaceships firing plasma cannons, cities burning on distant worlds. The images cycled through centuries of human conflict with mechanical precision. The Zephyrian High Chancellor rose from her seat. She stood 12 feet tall with 4 arms that ended in razor-sharp claws. Her insect-like head turned toward Carter as she spoke in clicking sounds that the translators converted to galactic standard. The evidence is clear and overwhelming. The species known as humans have engaged in constant warfare since their recorded history began. They have fought over land, resources, religious beliefs, and political systems. No other species in this galaxy has shown such consistent aggression. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Aquatic Federation's representative pulsed, with blue and green lights that formed words in the water-filled tank where she floated. Our analysis of human expansion shows a pattern of military conquest. They establish colonies by force and maintain them through threat of violence. In the past 50 years alone, they have been involved in armed conflicts in 17 different star systems. Carter watched the holographic evidence being presented. Battle footage from the Centauri colonial wars, military bases on asteroid, mining stations, human warships patrolling trade routes. Each image seemed to paint his species as galactic, warmongers bent on conquest. The crystalline collective's representative began to vibrate. The living crystal formation stood 15 feet high and spoke through harmonic frequencies that made the chamber walls ring like bells. The mathematics are simple. Humans have been in space for 87 Earth years. In that time, they have engaged in combat operations in 43% of the systems they have visited. No peaceful species shows such statistics. More evidence appeared in the air above Carter. Charts showing human military spending, graphs displaying weapon production rates, video feeds of human training exercises that looked more like preparation for invasion than defense. The data painted a picture of a species obsessed with war. The Herbarian delegate rustled his leaf-like appendages as he spoke in a voice like wind through trees. Our people have observed human behavior on 12 different worlds. They establish military compounds before civilian settlements. They train their young in combat techniques as standard education. Their entertainment media glorifies violence and conquest. This is not the behavior of a peaceful species. Carter had seen these same statistics in Earth's diplomatic briefings. He knew how they looked to species that had never faced extinction-level threats. The humans did spend enormous resources on military preparation. They did train their children in self-defense. Their movies and books were full of war stories and battles against impossible odds. The chamber's main display screen lit up with a new presenter. The scholarly representative from the cerebral cortex species appeared as a floating brain in a mechanical life support system. We have analyzed human literature, film, and digital entertainment spanning 500 years. Violence appears as a central theme in 68% of their creative works. War is portrayed as heroic and necessary. This cultural programming explains their aggressive expansion into our galaxy. Carter felt the weight of 47 different species staring at him. Some had eyes, others had sensory organs he couldn't even identify, but all of them seemed focused on judging his entire species based on the evidence being presented. The worst part was that none of the evidence was false. Humans did fight constantly. They had been involved in conflicts across known space. Their culture did celebrate warriors and battles about the silicon-based architects, who rarely spoke at council meetings, activated their translation metrics. We have constructed probability models based on human behavioral patterns. If current trends continue, humans will be involved in military conflicts with at least 15 additional species within the next century. The risk to galactic stability is unacceptable. The accusations continued for 3 hours. Species after species presented evidence of human aggression. Battle records, military budgets, weapon development programs, and cultural analysis all pointed to the same conclusion. Humanity was a violent species that posed a threat to the peaceful civilizations that made up the Galactic Council. Carter listened to every word without interruption. His diplomatic training had taught him that sometimes the best response was to let your accusers exhaust themselves before presenting your defense. But as the evidence mounted, he wondered if any defense would be enough. The neutral arbitrator, a mechanical intelligence that served as the council's judge, finally called for order. The accusations have been presented and documented. The evidence shows a clear pattern of aggressive behavior from the human species. Ambassador Carter, you now have the opportunity to respond to these charges before the council votes on proposed sanctions. Sanctions that would limit human expansion to their current territory. Restrictions on human military vessels in neutral space. Monitoring stations to observe human colonies for signs of aggressive expansion. Some council members had even suggested complete quarantine until humanity could prove they had abandoned their warlike nature. Carter stepped forward and looked up at the curved rows of alien representatives. Beings that had evolved on peaceful worlds where cooperation meant survival. Species that had never faced the kind of existential threats that had shaped human evolution. He had one chance to make them understand that everything they thought they knew about humanity was wrong. Honored representatives, he began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. Before I respond to your accusations, I would like to ask you some questions about your own worlds and your own evolution. With your permission, I believe the answers will provide important context for understanding human behavior. The arbitrator's lights flickered as it processed. The request. The accused may question the council for purposes of establishing relevant context. Proceed, Ambassador Carter. Carter took a deep breath and prepared to defend not just human actions, but the very nature of what it meant to be human in a galaxy that had never learned to fight for its survival. Carter walked slowly around the center of the chamber as he spoke. His footsteps echoed off the crystal walls, while 47 different species watched his every movement. The human ambassador had spent decades learning about alien cultures and their homeworlds. Now that knowledge would either save humanity's place in the galaxy or confirm their reputation as warmongers. High Chancellor of the Zephyrians, Carter said, turning toward the tall insectoid being. Please tell this council about your home world. What challenges did your species face during your evolution? The High Chancellor's forearms moved in what Carter recognized as confusion. Her translator device clicked rapidly before converting her response. Our world has always been abundant. 3 suns provide constant warmth and energy. The soil is rich with nutrients that feed our plant-based diet. We evolved from creatures that gathered nectar and pollen. There were no significant predators on our world. Cooperation and sharing allowed our civilization to develop peacefully over millions of years. Carter nodded and turned to the Aquatic Federation representative floating in her water tank. The blue and green lights under her translucent skin pulsed as she spoke. Our ocean world has tidal currents that distribute nutrients evenly across all regions. Food sources have never been scarce. Our species developed from filter feeders that worked together to process the rich organic matter in our seas. Conflict was unnecessary because resources were unlimited. The pattern continued as Carter questioned each species. The crystalline collective had evolved on a world rich with mineral deposits, where their crystal-based life forms could grow without competition. The Herbarian people came from a forest planet where symbiotic relationships with plants provided everything they needed. The cerebral cortex species had developed on a world with perfect atmospheric conditions and abundant energy sources. Every single species in the council chamber had evolved on worlds of plenty. Planets where cooperation meant survival because there was always enough for everyone. Worlds where the greatest challenge was learning to share resources efficiently rather than fighting for survival. Carter activated his personal communication device and sent a signal toward Earth. A holographic projection appeared next to him, showing a middle-aged woman with short brown hair and tired eyes. She wore the white coat of a scientist and held a data pad in her hands. Council members, I would like you to meet Dr. Lisa Murphy, Earth's leading expert on planetary evolution and species development. Dr. Murphy has spent her career studying how different environments shape the evolution of intelligent life. Dr. Murphy looked up at the assembled aliens with the calm expression of someone who had delivered difficult news many times before. Honored representatives, I have reviewed the evolutionary histories of your species as provided by your own scientists. Each of you developed on what we call garden worlds, planets with stable climates, abundant resources, and few existential threats. Your evolution focused on cooperation because your worlds rewarded that behavior. The holographic display behind Dr. Murphy lit up with an image of Earth as seen from space. The blue and green planet looked peaceful and beautiful, spinning slowly in the darkness. But then the image changed to show Earth's geological history across millions of years. This is Earth. Unlike your worlds, our planet has never been stable or safe. We have identified 5 major extinction events in Earth's history where between 70 and 90% of all life was destroyed. Asteroid impacts that blocked out the sun for years. Volcanic eruptions that poisoned the atmosphere. Ice ages that froze most of the planet's surface. The chamber grew quiet as alien representatives watched footage of Earth's violent past. Massive explosions throwing debris into space. Lava flows destroying entire continents. Glaciers covering what had once been tropical forests. Dr. Murphy continued her presentation with the patience of a teacher explaining basic concepts to students. On Earth, 99.9% of every species that has ever lived is now extinct. This includes several intelligent species that existed before humans. Our planet taught us that survival is never guaranteed, and extinction is always one disaster away. Carter watched the faces of the council members as they processed this information. Many of them had never considered what life would be like on a world where survival wasn't certain. Their own evolutionary histories were stories of gradual development and peaceful cooperation. Earth's history was a story of constant struggle against extinction. But surely, the Zephyrian High Chancellor said, her translator clicking nervously, this does not excuse human aggression toward other species. Dr. Murphy smiled sadly and changed the holographic display to show Earth's current ecosystem. Let me explain how this environment shaped human evolution. Humans did not evolve as the strongest or fastest species on Earth. We were prey animals for most of our development. Large predators hunted us. Natural disasters destroyed our early settlements. Disease wiped out entire populations. The display showed early human ancestors running from massive predators. Saber-toothed cats stalking human tribes. Cave bears that could crush human skulls with their jaws. Early humans hiding in caves during ice storms that lasted for months. Humans survived not because we were naturally aggressive, but because we learned to work together against threats that could destroy us. Every human conflict you have documented was actually preparation for a much larger fight. The fight against extinction itself. Carter stepped forward to address the council directly. Dr. Murphy is correct. Human warfare evolved as a training method for species survival. We learned to fight each other so we would be ready to fight the disasters that our planet kept throwing at us. Our military technology was developed to protect our species from existential threats. The crystalline collective representative vibrated with frequencies that sounded like confusion. But your species continues these violent behaviors even in space, far from your dangerous home world. Carter had expected this question. It was the heart of the matter that would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. That is correct. We do continue these behaviors in space. But not for the reasons you think. We continue them because we know something that your peaceful evolution never taught you. He paused and looked up at each representative in turn. We know that the universe is not a safe place. We know that extinction-level threats exist everywhere, not just on Earth. And we know that someone has to be ready to fight them when they come. The chamber fell silent as Carter's words echoed off the crystal walls. For the first time since the accusations began, the alien representatives seemed uncertain about their conclusions regarding human nature. Dr. Murphy touched her datapad, and the holographic display changed to show a new image. A human male in military uniform appeared next to her projection. He had short black hair, stern eyes, and the bearing of someone who had seen combat. The insignia on his uniform marked him as a ship captain. This is Captain Steve Rogers, commander of the human exploration vessel UES Horizon. Captain Rogers has been studying galactic threats for the past 15 years. I believe his perspective will help explain why humans behave the way we do in space. Captain Rogers nodded to the assembled council members before speaking. His voice was calm, but carried the authority of someone used to making life-and-death decisions. Honored representatives, I want to address your concerns about human military activities. You see our actions as aggression, but I need you to understand what we actually encounter out there in the dark between stars. The holographic display shifted to show star maps with red markers scattered throughout known space. Each marker pulsed like a warning beacon against the black background of space. Rogers pointed to the nearest cluster of red dots. These markers represent threats that most of your species have never had to consider. Rogue asteroids on collision courses with inhabited planets. Solar flares strong enough to sterilize entire systems. Gravitational anomalies that can tear apart space stations. A galaxy is full of things that can end civilizations without warning. The Aquatic Federation representative pulsed with confused colors. But these are natural phenomena. They cannot be fought with weapons or military force. Rogers smiled grimly and changed the display to show footage from his ship's encounters. You're partially correct. But many threats require exactly the kind of response that looks like military aggression to peaceful observers. Watch this recording from our mission to the Tau Ceti system 3 years ago. The hologram showed a massive asteroid tumbling through space toward a blue-green planet. The asteroid was the size of a small moon and would have destroyed all life on the planet if it had struck. Human ships moved into position around the massive rock. Plasma cannons that the Council had called weapons of war fired precisely calculated shots at specific points on the asteroid's surface. Those weapons you consider tools of conquest are actually tools of protection. We used controlled explosions to alter this asteroid's trajectory. The planet below had 2 billion Urbarian colonists who would have died if we had not intervened. Your own people requested our help, but they never understood that saving them required what you call military action. Carter watched the alien representatives as they processed this information. The Herbarian delegates' leaf-like appendages wrestled with what Carter recognized as embarrassment. The peaceful species had indeed called for human help, but had never connected that aid with the military capabilities. They now criticized Dr. Murphy activated another section of the display. Captain Rogers represents just one aspect of how humans have adapted their survival instincts for galactic conditions. But the pattern goes much deeper than disaster response. Steve, please explain human pack behavior in space. Rogers nodded and brought up new footage showing human rescue operations. Ships moving through debris fields to pull survivors from destroyed vessels. Medical teams working to save alien colonists from plague outbreaks. Engineers rebuilding damaged space stations while under fire from raiders. Humans evolved as pack hunters on Earth, but hunting was never about aggression for its own sake. It was about providing food and protection for our communities. In space, we apply the same instincts to protecting entire civilizations. When we see a threat to any intelligent species, our evolutionary programming tells us to eliminate that threat. The display showed human military units engaging space pirates who had been raiding Zephyrian trading vessels. The same weapons and tactics that the Council feared were being used to protect the very species that now accused humans of being warmongers. Every conflict you have documented follows this pattern. Humans identify a threat to civilian populations and respond with what appears to be disproportionate force. But we learned on Earth that threats to survival must be eliminated completely, or they return stronger. The crystalline collective representative vibrated with frequencies that translated as skepticism. This explanation assumes that humans can accurately identify genuine threats. What prevents you from seeing non-threats as dangers that must be eliminated? Dr. Murphy had anticipated this question. She brought up comparative behavioral studies showing human decision-making in crisis situations. This is actually where our evolution serves us well. Humans developed sophisticated threat assessment abilities because making mistakes on Earth meant extinction. We can distinguish between genuine dangers and false alarms better than most species. The data showed human response times and accuracy in identifying actual threats versus perceived threats. The statistics were impressive. Humans correctly identified real dangers 93% of the time and rarely responded to false alarms with violence. Carter stepped forward to address the Council directly. What Dr. Murphy and Captain Rogers are explaining is that human behavior in space is not about conquest or territorial expansion. It is about applying survival skills learned over millions of years to protect all intelligent life in the galaxy. The chamber buzzed with translation devices working overtime as alien representatives discussed this new perspective among themselves. The evidence they had presented earlier, showing human military activities, now looked different when viewed as protective rather than aggressive actions. Rogers activated one final display showing comprehensive data about human space operations. I want to share something that might surprise you. In the past 50 years of human space exploration, 73% of our military operations have been conducted on behalf of other species. We have never initiated a conflict for territorial gain or resource acquisition. The statistics filled the air above the council chamber. Rescue operations, disaster relief, anti-piracy patrols, and defensive actions. The data painted a picture of a species that used military capabilities primarily to help others rather than advance their own interests. The remaining 27% of our military actions were defensive responses to direct attacks on human civilians or infrastructure. Even then, our rules of engagement prioritize minimizing casualties and protecting non-combatants over achieving tactical advantages. Carter could see the alien representatives struggling to reconcile this information with their preconceived notions about human nature. The evidence was clear, but it challenged everything they thought they knew about the species. They had been preparing to sanction. Dr. Murphy delivered the final point that would change everything. The truth is that humans are not naturally aggressive. We are naturally protective. Our evolution on a dangerous world taught us to identify and eliminate threats before they could destroy our communities. In space, we have simply expanded our definition of community to include every intelligent species we encounter. The Galactic Council called for an emergency recess as news of the human defense spread throughout the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of species huddled in small groups, their translation devices buzzing with heated discussions. Carter remained in the center of the chamber while alien delegates argued about whether to believe what they had just heard. 3 hours later, the council reconvened with an atmosphere that felt completely different from the morning session. The accusations and anger had been replaced by uncertainty and careful curiosity. The neutral arbitrator's mechanical voice echoed through the chamber as it called for order. The council will now hear additional testimony regarding human activities in galactic space. Commander Linda Thompson of the Human Rescue Corps has requested permission to address the assembly. A new holographic projection appeared beside Carter. The woman who materialized looked to be in her 40s with graying brown hair tied back in a practical ponytail. Her uniform bore the insignia of the Human Rescue Corps, an organization that most council members had heard of, but never fully understood. Commander Thompson looked up at the curved rows of alien representatives with the calm expression of someone who had spent years explaining human actions to confused aliens. Honored council members, I lead the Human Rescue Corps, which coordinates all humanitarian operations in space. I have brought detailed mission logs from the past 50 years that I believe will interest you. The holographic display activated and began showing a scrolling list of operations. Each entry included dates, locations, species involved, and outcome reports. The list seemed endless as it rolled past, thousands of missions spanning decades of human space operations. These are every single military-style operation that human forces have conducted since we began exploring beyond our solar system. Want you to pay attention to the categories these missions fall into. The data reorganized itself into color-coded sections. The largest section, colored blue, took up nearly 3/4 of the display. Thompson pointed to it as she spoke. Blue represents humanitarian missions conducted on behalf of other species. Solar flare evacuations for Iberian colonies. Rescue operations for Aquatic Federation research stations. Anti-piracy patrols protecting crystalline collective mining operations. Carter watched the alien representatives as they studied the data. The sheer volume of humanitarian operations was staggering. Hundreds of missions every year, conducted by human forces to protect and assist other species throughout the galaxy. The Zephyrian High Chancellor's translator clicked rapidly as she processed the information. These records show human military vessels operating in Zephyrian space 47 times in the past decade. We were never informed of most of these operations. Thompson nodded calmly. That is correct, High Chancellor. Most of our humanitarian operations are conducted without notifying local governments because the threats we respond to develop too quickly for diplomatic channels. When a solar flare is heading toward your colonies, we do not have time to request permission to save your people. The display shifted to show specific mission reports. Video footage of human ships evacuating alien civilians from natural disasters. Medical teams treating plague victims on remote outposts. Engineering crews rebuilding destroyed infrastructure on worlds hit by asteroid impacts. Every mission follows the same pattern. We detect a threat to civilian populations, respond immediately. With appropriate force, resolve the crisis, and withdraw without seeking payment or territorial concessions. We do not stay to establish military bases or claim jurisdiction over the areas we protect. The Aquatic Federation representative pulsed with confused colors. But why do you not inform us of these operations? Surely diplomatic protocols require notification of military activities in our space. A new holographic figure appeared next to Thompson. This was Dr. Angela Davis, a woman with short black hair and the intense eyes of someone who studied behavior for a living. She wore the white coat of a research scientist and carried herself with the confidence of an expert in her field. I am Dr. Angela Davis, Earth's chief behavioral psychologist. I specialize in studying how human evolutionary psychology affects our modern behavior. Commander Thompson asked me to explain why humans often act without seeking permission in crisis situations. Dr. Davis activated a new section of the holographic display showing brain scans and behavioral analysis charts. Human brains are wired for immediate response to existential threats. When we identify a danger that could kill innocent beings, our evolutionary programming overrides social protocols and demands immediate action. The brain scans showed human neural activity during crisis situations. Certain regions lit up with intense activity, while others shut down completely. It was the brain of a species that had learned to act first and ask questions later when survival was at stake. This is what we call controlled aggression. Humans channel their survival instincts into protection of others. The same neural pathways that once helped us fight off predators now activate when we see other species in danger. We literally cannot ignore threats to civilian populations. Carter could see understanding beginning to dawn on some of the alien faces in the chamber. The pattern of human behavior that had seemed like preparation for conquest was actually an overdeveloped protective instinct applied on a galactic scale. Commander Thompson brought up another section of data that made several representatives shift uncomfortably in their seats. I want to address the green section of our mission logs. These represent defensive actions taken when human civilians or facilities were directly attacked. The green section was much smaller than the blue humanitarian section, but it was still substantial. Dozens of operations where human forces had responded to attacks on their own people and infrastructure. In every case, these defensive actions followed strict rules of engagement designed to minimize casualties and protect non-combatants. Human military doctrine prioritizes civilian evacuation over tactical advantage. We would rather lose a battle than harm innocent beings. The display showed footage from these defensive operations. Human soldiers taking cover to avoid firing near alien civilians. Medical teams treating wounded enemies alongside their own injured personnel. Evacuation ships designed with extra life support specifically to rescue members of other species. Dr. Davis pointed to the psychological profiles that accompanied each mission report. What you are seeing is human pack bonding behavior, extended to include all intelligent species. Humans evolved to protect their community, and in space, we consider every sentient being part of our community. The final revelation came when Thompson displayed the red section of the mission logs. It was tiny compared to the others, representing less than 5% of all human military operations. The red section represents operations conducted for human benefit alone, resource acquisition, territorial expansion, or strategic advantage. As you can see, these missions barely register in our overall activities. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The species they had accused of being warmongers spent less than 5% of their military efforts on their own interests. The remaining 95% was dedicated to protecting and helping others. Carter stepped forward to deliver the final piece of evidence that would change everything the Council thought they knew about humanity. There is one more thing you need to understand about human behavior in space. We have been quietly monitoring and preparing for threats that your peaceful evolution never taught you to recognize. Carter walked to the center of the chamber and looked up at the 47 species that had gathered to judge humanity. The accusations from the morning session seemed like ancient history now. The evidence presented by his colleagues had transformed the atmosphere completely, but he knew the most important revelation was yet to come. Honored representatives, everything you have heard today explains why humans behave the way we do. But there is one final truth that you must understand before you make your decision about our species. A new holographic figure materialized beside Carter. This was Captain Mike Johnson, a man with silver hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent decades staring into the dark spaces between stars. His uniform bore the insignia of Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Division, an organization that most aliens had never heard of. This is Captain Johnson, leader of our Deep Space Monitoring Division. For the past 30 years, he has been watching the galaxy for threats that most species cannot imagine. Mike, please show the Council what you have found. Captain Johnson activated the holographic display, and a chamber filled with a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Stars twinkled like diamonds against the black background, but scattered throughout the peaceful scene were red warning markers that pulsed like heartbeats. Representatives of the Galactic Council, what you are seeing are 17 different extinction-level threats currently moving toward inhabited systems throughout our galaxy. We have been tracking these dangers for decades and preparing responses without telling anyone because we knew our reputation would make our warnings seem like pretexts for military expansion. The alien representatives leaned forward in their seats as Johnson highlighted each threat. A massive asteroid swarm tumbling through space toward the Zephyrian home system. Solar instabilities that would sterilize 3 aquatic Federation colonies within the next 50 years. Gravitational anomalies that could tear apart the Crystalline Collective's main trading hub. The largest threat is this one, Johnson said, highlighting a section of space beyond the galactic rim. Long-range sensors have detected what appears to be a hostile intelligence moving toward our galaxy. The energy signatures suggest technology far beyond anything we have encountered. Estimated arrival time is 73 years. The chamber erupted in clicking, buzzing, and harmonic vibrations as alien representatives tried to process this information. The neutral arbitrator's mechanical voice cut through the chaos, demanding order. Carter raised his hands for silence. When the chamber quieted, he spoke with the calm authority of someone delivering news he had carried for years. This is why humans continue to develop military technology and maintain combat readiness even in peaceful times. We know the universe is not safe. We know threats exist that could destroy entire civilizations. And we know someone has to be ready to fight them when they arrive. The Zephyrian High Chancellor's translator clicked frantically as she spoke. Why have you hidden this information from us? If these threats are real, we have the right to know about them. Captain Johnson answered before Carter could respond. Because every time we have tried to warn other species about potential dangers, the response has been the same. You accuse us of creating false threats to justify military buildup. You claim we are trying to frighten you into accepting human dominance. Today's accusations prove that pattern would have continued. Dr. Davis reappeared in the holographic projection area. From a psychological perspective, this response makes perfect sense. Species that evolved on safe worlds have no frame of reference for existential threats. Your brains are not wired to process the possibility of extinction because your evolutionary history never required that ability. The display changed to show human defensive preparations that had been hidden from galactic view. Massive shipyards building vessels designed for deep space combat. Training facilities where human soldiers prepared for battles against unknown enemies. Research stations developing weapons and shields based on theoretical alien technologies. Everything you have interpreted as preparation for conquest has actually been preparation for defense, Carter explained. We have been building the military capacity to protect not just humanity, but every intelligent species in the galaxy. Commander Thompson stepped into the holographic area and activated new data displays. Our humanitarian missions have had a secondary purpose that we never mentioned. Every time we rescue alien civilians or defend your colonies, we gather information about your capabilities and vulnerabilities. Not to exploit them, but to better protect you when the real threats arrive. The uncomfortable truth settled over the chamber like a heavy blanket. Humans had been secretly preparing to defend species that had been preparing to sanction them for being too aggressive. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The crystalline collective representative vibrated with frequencies that translated as distress. You are asking us to trust a species that has hidden crucial information and made preparations without our knowledge or consent. Carter nodded slowly. You are correct. We have acted without your permission and made decisions that affect your future without consulting you. But we did so because we learned something from our evolutionary history that your peaceful development never taught you. He paused and looked at each representative in turn. Sometimes survival requires someone to make hard choices that others cannot understand or accept. Sometimes protecting innocent life means taking actions that look threatening to those being protected. The Aquatic Federation representative pulsed with colors that indicated deep thought. What exactly are you proposing, Ambassador Carter? Carter took a deep breath and delivered the proposal that would determine humanity's future in the galaxy. We propose the establishment of the Galactic Defense Initiative. Humans will serve as the galaxy's guardians against threats that peaceful species cannot handle. We will not rule you or control you. We will simply stand watch and fight the darkness so that you can continue to live in the light. The chamber fell silent as the implications of this offer sank in. Humans were not asking for territory or resources or political power. They were offering to accept the burden of being the galaxy's protectors, knowing that this role would make them forever different from the species they defended. Captain Johnson activated one final display, showing the incoming asteroid swarm heading for the Zephyrian system. High Chancellor, your home world will be impacted by these asteroids in 18 months. We have already positioned defensive platforms in your system and developed a plan to redirect the threat. We can begin implementation immediately if you give us permission. The Zephyrian High Chancellor stared at the display for a long moment before her translator began clicking. On behalf of the Zephyrian people, I formally request human protection for our home system. One by one, other representatives followed suit. The Aquatic Federation requested human assistance with their solar instability problem. The Crystalline Collective asked for help defending their trade routes. Even the peaceful Herbarian delegate requested human protection for their vulnerable colony worlds. Carter smiled as he watched the transformation taking place. The Galactic Council does not need to fear humanity's capacity for violence. You need to embrace it as your shield against the dangers that your peaceful evolution left you unable to face. The final vote was unanimous. Humanity was designated as the official guardians of the galaxy, protectors of all intelligent life against the threats that lurked in the dark spaces between stars. The species that had been accused of being war-hungry became the defenders of those who had never learned to fight.